Did you know that until this week, Jews could not legally purchase land in Judea and Samaria, and that Israel has been enforcing this restriction for nearly 60 years? That's right, a nation founded on Jewish national self-determination, a democracy that prides itself on liberal values, enforced a racist Jordanian edict prohibiting Jews from buying land in their ancestral heartland. That was the law enforced until Sunday. So today we're going to talk about how we got here, why it matters, and what it reveals about Israel's struggle with its own sovereignty. I'm Ilana Maisel-Diamant, and this is Basic Law. Now, a lot of the reporting this week has focused on the political implications of new Israeli policies which expand Israel's authority in Judea and Samaria, and of course, the corresponding uproar from the usual international suspects. As a result, not nearly enough attention has been paid to what should be a universally celebrated dramatic step for human and civil rights, and also, at the same time, a cause for deep introspection on the part of the State of Israel. So, on Sunday, February 8th, Israel's Security Cabinet approved potentially far-reaching changes to land policy in Judea and Samaria. Now, explaining these revisions in full is a show in and of itself, maybe several, but for now, we'll sum it up by saying that the moves are substantial and clearly designed to enhance Israeli sovereignty. Finance Minister Smotrich was even bolder in his statement that the new measures aim, quote, to kill the idea of a Palestinian state. So, cue the criticism from the EU and several Muslim states, and a rather careful statement from the United States opposing annexation of the area. Now, this is a discussion that can quickly turn into an Acme-type stick of dynamite, so I want to focus on one important detail, which is the revocation of a Jordanian law prohibiting the sale of land to those of non-Arab origin in Judea and Samaria. The prohibition in question, Jordanian Law 40, dates to Jordan's illegal occupation of the area in 1948 to 1967, in which their legal code permitted land sales only to those of Arab origin. It was targeted toward preventing land purchases by Jews. And Israel gained this territory in 1967, but chose not to apply Israeli law there, despite claiming legitimate ownership of the land. Instead, anticipating future peace deals with the land as a bargaining chip, it decided to legally administer the area as if it were a military occupier. That means that under customary international law, Israel had to continue to respect local laws unless absolutely prevented. And for that reason, alongside IDF military orders, Ottoman and Jordanian laws in effect in 1967 are still there, including this one, and a number of other peculiar and discriminatory laws that are beyond the scope of this show. Now, despite its general maintenance of the local law, Israel did make at least one small change to the Jordanian law on the question of land purchase, but it was subtle. You see, the prohibition against non-Arab land purchases applied only to individuals and not to corporations. So, starting in the 1970s, Israel allowed Jews to set up companies under Jordanian law in Judea and Samaria, and those companies purchase and resell land to Jews. We're not going to linger on the purchase process, which the Ministry of Defense tightly controls, but it's complex. This prohibition, coupled with onerous permit requirements, added years and costs to every transaction. That means layers of bureaucracy that often left the door open to nonsensical legal challenges, often stalling transactions that were never completed and deterring development of the area. But beyond the real human cost, there's also the national one, the democratic one, the Jewish one. The 2026 JNS International Policy Summit will take place April 15th to 17th at the Waldorf Astoria in Jerusalem. Register today at jns-summit.org and use the coupon code JNSTV, that is JNSTV, one word, to receive 20% off all tickets. I look forward to seeing you in Jerusalem. Until Sunday, we were in a bizarre reality where, to buy itself quiet, Israel, again, a liberal democracy, claimed rightful ownership of the land, and on the other hand, used international humanitarian law to keep in force a racist Jordanian law designed to ethnically cleanse Jews from the area. And that was a law created by a regime that the entire world said was illegally there to begin with. Now, of course, successive Israeli governments saw the problem, but seeing it and fixing it turned out to be two very different things. In 2018, Defense Minister Lieberman created a committee to review the law for repeal, and under Naftali Bennett's defense tenure, the committee concluded that the restriction should be cancelled. However, when the defense ministry passed to Benny Gantz, the move stalled due to fears of Palestinian violence. Land rights NGO Regavim sued in the Supreme Court to force the repeal. And while the court initially questioned the law, they ultimately deferred to Gantz in 2022. The panel wrote, "We will not hide that the Jordanian law has somewhat of a racist odor. However, the language of the law is one thing and the reality on the ground is another." Judge Grosskopf added that while the law was clearly racist, the cost of intervention exceeded the benefit, and this was a political question outside the court's jurisdiction. In fact, the court said that the Knesset would be required to change the situation. Now, the Supreme Court of Israel is considered by friend and foe alike to be the seat of Israel's progressive values. By its own design, the court has taken jurisdiction over cases that courts in other countries would never have dreamed of on humanitarian grounds. These include rewriting the placement of Israel's security fence, forcing the IDF to send humanitarian aid packages into a church held hostage by Palestinian terrorists, and critiquing the IDF's rules of military engagement. And because of that, there are times when not taking jurisdiction is interpreted within Israel as its own political statement. And that goes doubly when there's a line of bizarre decisions by both the political and legal rungs that allow for discrimination against Jewish civil rights, as they all attempt to negotiate this complex legal, political, and security corner that Israel stuffed itself into starting in 1967. Now, the question of exactly how we got here has many answers, and I don't want to diminish some of the more obvious and weighty ones. There's been vast international pressure to restrain Jewish settlement and move toward Palestinian statehood, and that used to have much greater resonance within the fractured and once more utopian Israeli public. There has been a previously unbreakable dependence on American diplomatic and military partnership and on trade with European partners. Add to all of that just a pinch of Israeli attempts to limit the existential threat of this place turning into a geopolitical tinderbox, and Israel's preference for clever, tactical policymaking, delayed or nominal sovereignty, and even the denting of Jewish civil rights can be understood in pragmatic terms. But I want to hone in on what this story says about the Israeli character and the age-old divisions that we're dealing with, because this racist land law is not actually an isolated case. It's part of a pattern. The question of Jewish sovereignty and how to implement it has been a fault line within the Zionist movement since its inception. And nowhere is this internal division more visible than in the moments of our greatest victories, when we actually win territory in defensive wars. So I'll show you now the most symbolic example imaginable. In June 1967, Israeli forces reached the Temple Mount for the first time in 2,000 years. The first officers on site fly an Israeli flag from the roof of the Dome of the Rock. It's a moment of profound historical significance. The holiest site in Judaism, back under Jewish sovereignty. Defense Minister Moshe Dayan arrives soon after, removes the flag, and standing atop of this newly liberated site, infamously asks, "What do we need this whole Vatican for?" At one of the most consequential places and one of the most consequential moments for the Jewish people in their entire history, the Defense Minister of Israel was asking, why do we need this administrative and security headache? And in fact, he decided we didn't. Dayan closed a deal with the Jordanian Waqf that it would retain control of this ultimate symbol of Jewish identity, and an arrangement known as the status quo limits non-Muslim access and use of the site. To this day, Israeli police officers enforce a ban on non-Muslim prayer, which is primarily targeted at Jews. Jews have been arrested for bowing, moving their lips in worship, or bringing religious symbols to the site. Now, Israel has full sovereignty over Jerusalem, including the Temple Mount. But a reasonable mind could ask, do we? And this status quo approach, preferring diplomatic quiet over exercising sovereign rights, has defined Israeli policy across all territories won in defensive wars. So, for instance, the Golan Heights was held under military administration for 14 years before annexation in 1981, treated as a bargaining chip the whole time. Judea and Samaria never annexed, never had Israeli law applied, military administration for 58 years and counting. We don't have time to get into the long disaster of the Oslo Accords, which cost thousands of Israeli lives, and which were concluded with parties whose main hobbies include financing terrorism and embezzling foreign aid funding. Driven by deep fragmentation internally, Israel somehow couples a muscular military defense of its people and its territory in war with a haphazard and reactive strategy of administration once the war is won. Now, despite this official ambivalence, the movement to resettle Jewish life in Judea and Samaria has grown over the years, and now the stars have aligned politically, diplomatically, and through the harshest wake-up calls imaginable on October 7th, making these new policy moves possible, including this clear correction to a truly terrible, racist law aimed at ethnically cleansing Jews. Whatever one's position is on the larger issue of sovereignty, and most especially in an age where the fight against anti-Semitism is an urgent discussion everywhere in the West, that one change should be applauded by every world leader claiming the mantle of liberal values. Any critic who condemns the policy changes while ignoring this correction reveals that their concern isn't really about human rights. It's about which humans have the rights. So what does this all mean for the Israeli future? Well, the messiness that pervades our legal and governance structures, which is something that we discuss here often, reflects a fundamental instability within our culture, and it's reflected just as much in the way that we think about sovereignty. We're in a permanent state of short-term planning and broken consensus on the most fundamental priorities of our identity, and it's expressed in everything, down to the deals that we cut to square circles in impossible situations. But we may be at a tipping point. The repeal this week and the broader moves that accompanied it send a clear message, at least from this coalition. After giving every possible legal and political gambit a chance, often with terrible outcomes, perhaps it's time for a more clear-throated approach to sovereignty that protects both Jewish life and democratic values. Given Israeli demographic trends and tragic reality checks like October 7th, a newer, more traditionalist and nationalistic consensus may be forming about Israel's self-definition and how it is expressed. What that looks like the coming years will tell. But this week shows that a nation that spent over 50 years bending over backwards to placate internal and external forces, even enforcing racist laws against its own people in its own land, is finally asking whether false quiet is worth more than justice. I'll see you here next week.